So it's great to have Leslie with us. I'm just going to repeat that since the recording was paused. And from the Federation, just a pleasure. So Leslie, let me hand you the ball and not only welcome you, but give you the reins.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to partner again with the ARC. During the first 6 months of COVID, we were on a team together looking at DESE guidance as it came out on Friday afternoon, meeting with the ARC on Sunday night to get it ready for Monday morning. So it's really been a nice collaborative effort, and I'm just so pleased to be here today. And I'm going to try and share my screen and make this all work. You know how you do things over and over again, and just hope it works. Slideshow from the beginning. So just give me the thumbs up, Leo, that you're seeing my screen. Yay, wonderful, thanks. So today it's all about what is a SEPAC, and I've answered the question right here for you. It's a Special Education Parent Advisory Council. For those who don't know, the Federation has been around for I think almost 47, 48 years now, started by parents as a result of all of the advocacy work to get that first special education law here in Massachusetts enacted, Chapter 766. And as a result of that, you know, families were saying, gee, what do we know about this law? And then when IDEA came out, it was funded as a pilot project that has lasted, and we are still having that funding under the federal government to support a parent training and information center here in Massachusetts. So it's free advice and a call center for families. So that, because it's all about learning how to understand the law and advocate for your child. And I really am a big fan of the word advocate, because I think you not only have to learn to advocate for your own child, then you need to work with your SEPAC in your local school district, whether it be a charter or a public school district. They're both public school districts, to kind of advocate for systems change within your school system. But then there's that third piece, and this is where I just basically say, well, you're going to become best friends with the ARC, is to advocate for systems change and funding on the state level for our young people as they enter the adult world. And so advocacy is a really big piece, and I think you can learn it not only at the Federation, but you can learn it through your SEPAC. So I'm really excited to talk about SEPACs today. I started the one in my community because it wasn't there. It became my support center and my way to influence decision-making in my community, in my school committee. So it's really driven by families, by volunteers, and they have an advisory role. Every school district in the state is required to have one, and they really can, function very differently. It's local control, local rules, but we hope that they're starting to talk to the district about the programs, the policies that are affecting all students, but mostly students with disabilities, whether they be on an IEP or 504 plan, because they want to know what's working and what's not working. We're spending a lot of money on special education, so let's make it work for everyone, for families and students. And the SEPAC is very different from a parent group, a regular parent group. They work district-wide, they're not school-based. They have a real formal role under the law. They can work with the other parent groups, and I think that's really where we get that really robust commitment by a district around inclusion of all students in all activities, is when you work with other parent groups to make sure that everything is accessible for all students. And they're really the bridge between district and families, especially around communication, a lot of issues, disseminating information. We've had the last 2 years a very dynamic, changing system. We closed schools, we went remote, we came back partially in person, getting families all of that information. That was the role of SEPACs, and they did an incredibly fantastic job. And they're also the ones, raising questions. Question-based, to me, is the best way to work within a district, is ask the questions, drive the dialogue, drive the conversation about things that are affecting students. Ooh, is that me clicking yes? Okay, so who can be a part of a SEPAC? Really, it's supposed to be driven by parents of children with disabilities, But the law says other interested parties. And I always encourage SEPACs to welcome everyone to the tent. I mean, we really could use everyone involved. So if they're community members, educators who want to get involved in the work of the SEPAC, that's great. I think it should be led by parents, but I think it should involve a larger school community. And when we say parents at the Federation, we mean everyone. We have a very broad definition of parents, including any caregiver, any guardian of a child in school. And really, you don't have to have any background. And so I came into this work as an attorney, but really that hands-on how to be a parent, how to navigate the IEP process and work with schools was all done outside of my law school training. So, and that's something the MassPAC can support volunteer parent leaders is we can help you understand how this works, the role, provide some forms and documents so that, you don't have to have a great background in this. We can help you along the way. Now, the role of the SEPAC is really advisory, and they're really working to meet with families, engage families, listen to families, what are your concerns, and see what rises up to be a systemic issue. They don't really advocate for one family at a time, but ultimately some of the work that they might do would help families along the way. And so they're not making policy, that's what school committees do, and administrations of schools, but they're there to help inform that decision making, because we're really all about improving educational outcomes for students, and looking at, what are some of the unmet needs. And when new programs and new policies come forward, I really think it's important because we're the taxpayers, folks. We're the ones who are supporting these schools, that we should be part at the table in the decision making to inform, is this, and sometimes things don't work, and that's okay. Just getting that feedback so that policies can be reflective of best practices. So they do have specific duties under the law, and I'm really excited to be in Massachusetts. We're only one of 7 states in the nation that has codified and put into the law the requirement to have a special education parent advisory council. And so we advise local schools on not only education, but safety of students with disabilities, which was so key during COVID to make sure that all of those families with complex medical needs had their concerns brought to the school committee through an advisory board. They should be meeting regularly with school officials, and that helps that exchange of information back and forth, and you can deal with problems quickly if you're meeting with school officials on a regular basis. And here's the one where it's a little bit more difficult, but we're just keep pushing the envelope here so that they get participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of the special education programming. So families should be sitting in those committees, those task force, those deciding groups that make recommendations to the school, and including around hiring of key personnel within the district, so that there's always that family lens on everything and the special education lens, because it's so important for our students. SEPACs are really local based, and they write their own bylaws. I think one of the pieces that we love SEPACs do is that they are collaborating all the time. It's really a process that we move forward together. Some school districts work a little bit better with their SEPACs than others, but the goal is to really have that engagement of families in lots of decision, in places where decision makers are meeting, that they get information to make those decisions. And they're not required to support them financially, but a lot of them do great work to provide training, support, and allow SEPACs now are using school Zoom platforms or Google Meetups so that they can meet with families remotely. How do families find their SEPAC? I suggest they go to the district website. Usually there's a special education page, and most school districts are putting the information on how to contact their SEPAC on that page. check out Facebook. That's a free resource for SEPACs, a great way for them to disseminate a lot of information. So they do have, many of them have Facebook groups and resources, but you can also contact MASPAC at the Federation or myself. I have my email at the end here, and I have a database. So I will connect you to those leaders so that you can really find out how to join and how to participate in your local SEPAC. If your student goes to a Chapter 766 school, they're required to have a SEPAG, a Special Education Parent Advisory Group, a little bit different under the law, but I also have some contact information for those organizations. And you can be a member of your local school district SEPAC and your 766 school parent group. So you can have two hats on at the same time and be involved in those two groups. And here's some resources, just so that you know. MASPAC is a project at the Federation, and we have a website page with lots of resources. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has a guidance document for SEPACs, which we are updating, and it will be out, the new one out this year. And it's based on this wonderful new national SEPAC guide called Advocacy in Action. It's an online document, and I love it because it has just a wonderful collaborative tone, and it speaks to parents being partners in the whole process, not only at their IEP meeting, but in their SEPAC, working with schools, and just getting families ready to advocate, because we know how important that advocacy, those advocacy skills are in a lifetime. So just here's, my name again is Leslie. You won't forget that one. And you can reach me at this email address, and I'm happy to take all of your questions if you don't feel comfortable today online, and I can answer them and share resources. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I don't know how you take
that
questions.
was awesome, Leslie. That was awesome, and I'd love to get the PDF of that. We can share it with people that are on the call today and others. Yeah, so if people, I want to ask you one thing right away, and then people should jump in. So I was thinking about the human aspect of this, right? And how tough each SEPAC needs a leader, right? So your role is really important. The guidance is really important, because sometimes it's so hard for families to advocate for themselves, but then to lead a group like this, right? The different personalities, right? So it's not a simple, it's not a simple thing. And yet without that human involvement, right, there's not going to be the input, substantive input. Yeah, go ahead.
I do encourage, it's hard to step up and say, I'm going to chair this, I'm going to lead this, and you don't really know what you're doing. So when a SEPAC is just starting off, I say, why don't you have an interim leadership team? You know, get a couple of other people together and do this together. I advocate for co-chairs or co-chairs, because I know as a parent, there were nights that I just couldn't make it out. My kids were just not in a good place, and I had to rely on others to lead. And I think that collaborative spirit is really great. So having multiple people in leadership roles in your SEPAC is good. It brings different perspectives also. And so that's something. The one amazing thing that I have found, I've been doing this work for 11 years, and I'm letting others do my job. There are a bunch of SEPAC officers who have started Facebook groups and provide support to other leaders. They share documentation. When someone says, gee, you know, I'm thinking of doing a brochure, people chime in, here's mine in a Word format, steal my stuff. They just have been wonderful mentors for other leaders. And people are able to ask all of those questions that they have, not only to me, but to other leaders who are on the ground doing this work day in and day out. So there is an incredible support network for anybody who wants to step up to leadership. But I also want to encourage everybody here on this call, or anyone who's listening, is just get involved, attend a meeting, provide some of that input. Bring your perspective to the table. It's so important, especially for families whose English is not their first language, because we know those students in those families sometimes are they have some barriers to participate. And so anytime that we can hear more voices, we just don't know how that is, reading in all of these different communities unless those communities participate. So I'm all about starting small, asking for help, just asking lots of questions so that you can get going and get started. And there is no perfect model for any, you don't have to meet monthly. You can meet whatever works for your community.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Anybody I don't want to monopolize the questions. Anybody want to jump in, make a comment or ask a question? So Kathleen, who's on the call with us today, one of our team members, she's actually, my hunch is she was on a CPAC and then went on to run for school committee. And
Doing both now.
Right. So
dual role.
Yeah.
And we have, I think, 5 others in this state. And that to me is the most exciting, is that somebody was in a role as a CPAC leader, working locally, and felt, I really want to be in that decision-making group. And they ran for office as their school committee, a member, and were elected to the school board. And they can serve in a dual role. They can effectively work and, collect the family voice and perspective, and also sit on that decision-making board. And we have, I think, 5 current CPAC officers that are also school committee members,
right.
Rising to that next level of advocacy in their communities. Carolyn, you unmuted, so you can ask.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm not, my son is 35 and he's in an adult residential placement. And I just have to say, I feel the lack of any parent organization. There's no such animal connected with the adult
world.
agency.
Yeah.
I'm in parent support group, but it's an offline gathering of people that I've known over 25, 30 years. So what you're doing is wonderful. It's too bad it doesn't exist in the adult post-22 world.
It's making my brain spin, though. It's like, how can we take this model and maybe move it into different things? I know there are statewide advisory boards around some of the adult agencies, and the Federation sits on some of those boards to bring that family voice, but I also know that there are parents doing that, and there's a requirement to have parents on a lot of these advisory boards.
There's area boards, and what happens though is, I think the parents, depending on the board and the staff that coach from the state agency, they take different forms. And I think I was actually thinking the same thing, Carolyn, as you were, as I was listening to Leslie, thinking about, what the ARC used to be on the local level, and the role it played. And as kids grew up, they became advocates for community services, and the right kind. But the world changed, and now it actually discourages family involvement as a rule, the organizations, because of the people aren't trained, to interact. I think that's part of it. I think there's also what America sort of has evolved doesn't help culturally. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, if someone's in, the adult agencies are made up of, the individuals served are from families from a huge diversity of communities.
Right.
It's not, but my son was at the New England Center for 14 years, and they had a very robust and helpful family group. So those parents were not from one community, and they came and they participated. So
that was probably tied into special, that was also tied into the culture of special ed and CPACs, and having, it spilled over into private schools as well.
Well, also the structure of that, where in adult services, sometimes you have a house, just the residents, and the kids are going to different day programs, and there's a lot of splitting and
No, but you're
Let's
making
make it
me
a
think.
topic. Let's make that a topic for a
I
future
think
thing for
that's.
the adult world. Let's do that. And yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Leslie. Excuse me.
The other thing I encourage you, if you are on Facebook, there is a wonderful web page called the Massachusetts Transition to Adulthood. And even though it's about transitioning into that world, I think there are over 3,000 people on that page right now, and it's moderated by the ARC and the Federation and others. But people are sharing great information. It's that parent-to-parent information exchange. And you can ask that question and even say, gee, my son is in this program. Are there anybody else in that program? And make those connections with other families and build your own support community. And I think that's, a lot of people have taken what they've done in SEPAC and then taken that into, the next phase. And that's building that. We know it takes a village, and parents are wonderful about sharing information and resources. And so try the Facebook group, Massachusetts Transition to Adulthood. Answer the 2 questions so we can approve you that you're a parent and where
Not
you
doing
live.
Facebook right now, but I'll.
We
But
can
that's
get you the
a great
link with
resource.
Carolyn. We can get
Okay.
you, and if people are interested here in the link, we can put it in, we'll tuck it into the front end PowerPoint
I know
slides. that
Carrie
have.
knows that.
So Leo
that-
and Leslie, Jen has a question. So Jen, I don't know if you want to just unmute yourself and ask away.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jen. I just volunteered to get involved in Duxbury's CPAC, and I see at least one of my current CPAC board members on the call. I had a question about how to know if you're being successful. I in previous roles in the private sector, we thought a lot about how do we know we're doing the right thing, right? Is it like, are we talking like qualitative kind of sentiment from parents? Are we talking about growing the size of the group, et cetera? Maybe a weird question, but I'm just curious if there are things that others have learned that are markers of success that they could share as we start to think about our programming moving forward.
Good question. So you can do numbers. You can say number of people who are on your Facebook group or come to meetings, but I think it goes beyond numbers. And I think it's, I recommend that every CPAC do an annual presentation or report to their school committee on what was working, what didn't work, initiatives. I also think you can survey people. I know we're all surveyed out right now, but you can ask for feedback and get some feedback from your constituents. Look to see how much you're involved with, and that's in that participation, planning, and evaluation. Did you sit on any hiring committees? Did you participate in any evaluation of programming? Did they ask when they were making change in procedures in schools, even like masking? Were you at the table? And so documenting that also, you're creating a record within your system, but you're also, when you present to the school committee, you're out in public and you're documenting your success or your challenges, because sometimes you have an initiative that's not being moved forward, but you're coming forward all the time saying, we still think this is important and we want the district to address it, bring resources to the table about that. So I think it goes, you can collect some number data, but maybe some anecdotal data. And I'm also encouraging CPACs to start to reach out to transition age youth, to put a youth on your committee, in your leadership committee, to be informed by youth. We're doing this for CPACs are school-based. It's all about students. And one, I think we need to hear the student voice. And two, I think we need to give students the opportunity to participate in a leadership type of group and develop that skill set so that they can take it into the next level. So that's another way to find out how you're doing, is to talk to students, have a focus group with students and get that input. So I have lots of ideas, so you feel free to reach out to me. We do a CPAC summer school at the Federation. It's going to begin the first day of summer on June 21st, and the curriculum is a national-based serving on groups curriculum to teach new parents and members of the community how to serve on a group, what the roles groups do, the skill set that you need to participate in a group, how to listen, all of those things. So there's lots of opportunities for new people to learn some new skills. So thanks for stepping up to leadership, because I know it's not easy.
Oh, thank you for that great answer. I took some notes.
I think that's the hardest thing for families to do, is to say, I'm going to do one more thing. And, you know, so we have busy lives. And if you have kids with challenges, that means you are navigating lots of schedules, lots of time for, you know, the hours we put in homework, trying to do homework. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I have young adult sons, because it was difficult. It was really challenging. But by being involved in my SEPAC, I think I made some change. There were things that were not working. And when you have these transparent, open dialogue with your school, like, gee, the extended school year programming is not working. You tell us when it's going to happen too late. We never know what school it's going to be in. We never know who's teaching it and what's the focus. By being more transparent and driving a better conversation about them divulging that information in March so we could plan a family summer vacation was really important. And that didn't cost anybody any money. It was just saying, this isn't working. Can we work together to address it? And I think that's the power of SEPACs. That's the power of parents willing to come to the table to be part of the solutions, not just saying this is a problem, saying I'm going to work with you on this.
That's a great example, Leslie, to give people an idea, you know, that's such an obvious thing if you're living it, but it's not necessarily at the school. People, or at an adult agency, regardless, wherever it is, people don't think of the other side of it, you know, and what you're telling people is you have the right to say, hey, consider us. You know, this is our life, right? And there's probably other good examples like that of things that somebody might take for granted, not even know they could speak up about it.
Yep. Marianne, you have your Marianne Welsh, you have your hand raised. You can.
Yeah, hi. So I'm one of those people that is on the school committee and also affiliated with the SEPAC. I had a question specifically about SEPAC liaisons, and my understanding it's kind of varied between different districts. Some just report maybe once a month. Some have some sort of like a non-voting membership with the school committee. Ours right now just does reports, like a subcommittee report every month, and shares their concerns or what's going on. Is there like a best practice for SEPAC liaisons?
It depends. There's my lawyer answer. So it really depends on the person who's acting. So this is a liaison is somebody who's on the school committee, who's assigned a role, and some school committees have much more formal definitions of a liaison to the SEPAC. And so that person usually attends the SEPAC meetings and then brings information back to the school committee, or that perspective. Or if a question came up, they would say, gee, I was at the last meeting and whatever. I still want the SEPAC personnel to be that person who advises directly the school committee and would come to a school committee meeting if there was a big issue, that they would have that presence in the meeting and have some dialogue. But it's a nice role because they can, I know parents, it's hard for families to attend these very long school committee meetings. And so having somebody come from the school committee and come to a SEPAC meeting and give you a quick summary of maybe some pertinent things that would be of interest to the SEPAC. It's a nice relationship. I haven't seen a written role yet, but doesn't mean we can't create one. And it's something that I would ask my membership and SEPAC officers to say, do you have one? Do you have a written role? What works best? And maybe we can come up with a best practice document to encourage all school committees to have a liaison to this group, so that exchange of information is a little easier. It's a good idea. It just means more work. Thank you very much. I think I saw somebody else, Maren Jacobs or Marin. Do you have a question? No, okay.
I have a comment. I got involved with a special needs PAC many years ago. And at the time, my daughter was attending school outside of the local school district because the school was not accessible. And, you know, there were plans coming up to actually do away with that school. It was a middle school age school. And, but anyway, I got a phone call from the special ed director telling me they were moving the multiply handicapped class that they had from the elementary school somewhere else in the school system, but they hadn't decided where yet. And I said, well, it won't work for Lisa in the middle school because it's not accessible. However, she's not that far from high school age, and neither are some of the other folks in the class. Is there anything available at the high school? And they're like, well, that's one of the considerations we've been making. So I said, well, I'd really like to be involved in any conversation that takes place about that. And the SPED director said, sure. So I called another parent who I knew had her daughter in that same class and asked her to talk to the special ed teacher too. So we were both part of that committee that investigated where this class was going to go and what it would look like. And there were individuals of all levels in the class. And so we sat down and we found out from the SPED director that there was 3 classrooms in the high school that were not being utilized. So we said, well, let's ask for all 3, because we think it would be smart to have a kitchen where we could teach, you know, self-help skills, space for a dedicated space for physical therapy, speech therapy, and a handicapped bathroom. And that would take up, you know, more space than 1 classroom. We got 2 classrooms and ended up with this fabulous classroom that every other teacher envied in the whole school. And it worked out so well. And from that, because the other parents were so happy with the classroom and the change in the program to more age appropriate, they were more than happy to join the special needs PAC. So
But
we had
I love that. What a great story. So you're doing the work. You're bringing the family voice and experience to the school. Making a better programming, better outcomes for kids. I love that story. Thank you.
you know, and through the years, we were constantly making suggestions. Like, you know, the kids got to get ready to do some kind of a job. How are they going to do that? We convinced them to teach them how to take the bus, where the bank was, how to do banking, where to go to the post office. And half of the class that were capable of working, these were 10 kids, graduated with jobs.
Oh my
great.
gosh. So
That's great,
here's,
Maren. Thank you.
It really truly works.
I love it. So you have to remember that schools sometimes are very focused on academics. And what we bring is that quality of life, you know,
Absolutely.
building that community for students, a
Mhm.
work experience, you know, making friends, participating, volunteering in the community. That's what families can bring to the table. Those ideas of like, how about we try this? How about we try that? And then when it works, it's better programming for all. So thank you so much for advocating for your own student and for others. And I think that's, to me, why I still do CPAC work, because I see it as an opportunity to make the system work better for kids.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
you can, you know, kind of guide it.
And what was your training to do that? Not at all. You just
I
were
was a mother.
you're a mom.
Well, I was thinking that also gave a buzz to the CPAC group, is what Marion was saying. More people joined because of the success. So it sort of comes, right, feeds into it. And then that collaboration, Leslie, that you were talking about, sharing the work with others. You know what I was going to ask you? You said Massachusetts is only one of 7 states to have put into law the CPAC. Is,
Yeah.
you know, so is that based on the federal idea, or what was, predecessor idea, or is
So
it?
it's not under IDEA. It's not. So this requirement, it comes under state law, and it's the recognition, I think, by a lot of states. And Massachusetts has a pretty good special ed law and approach to
Right,
special
right.
education programming. But they saw families as an integral part of this process and the advisory nature of it. And we actually have a very specific thing that every school district has to have one. There is an opportunity if a district is struggling to get families to the table. They usually, involve me and the Federation, but they can get a waiver for 3 years as they rebuild their CPAC. So it needs a constant flow of families coming in at the younger ages, and how important it is to be
Are
involved
you hungry?
when your families are exiting at transition age.
If the
So
concrete
the
comes, that order.
getting families kind of re-energized within their CPAC as they start to talk about community-based programming, what type of opportunities are for students in transition age and in that 18 to 22 program.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's big work. I mean, it's really, I can't imagine there's as many well, I guess some are collaborative school districts, right? So it's not every single, like there's Bridgewater, Raynham, and there's certain,
Correct.
right? So I'm
But
assuming,
but those are more difficult, especially out west. Like I think it's Central Berkshire has 5 communities that go into
Wow.
that. So that there's 5 different kind of local K-8 schools, and then they come
Wow.
together regionally. It's difficult for those families to connect because they don't live in the same community. They may not go to the same, have the same elementary program as they move into a secondary program, or it's very difficult for them to drive to a local meeting. Excuse me. So being virtual has really bumped up.
right?
Think of it. We don't have to get childcare. You don't have to travel. And frankly, you can cook dinner while you're listening to a meeting. So virtual has been a really great support for CPACs and their work.
Great. Well, Leslie, this is great. Before we close it up, first I want to thank you, and then I'm going to ask Carrie to mention any things coming up this week. But Leslie, I really appreciate it. I think we'll be putting this online, encouraging people to look at it, and obviously to go to your site as well at the Federation. So thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Really appreciate it. Carrie, do you want to add?
Sure.
I want
Yeah,
to put in
no.
a plug for June 9th first, even though you've got something in a couple of days. I want to put in
Yeah,
a
no,
plug.
we're on Wednesday, actually at noon, we're having a webinar on demystifying Chapter 688, which is the process that school systems refer students who need additional services as adults. Just incredibly important, and it's really confusing. So we're hoping that Diane Latiscus, that's her job. She is going to kind of clarify what happens with a Chapter 688 referral. And then the week after, we're having, I'm not sure if any of you are having your kiddos work a summer job. A lot of times people are always worried about what happens to that Social Security. So we are having Kathleen Kelly from who's a benefit specialist from Mass Rehab Commission. And she's going to talk about, some of this, the guidelines that students aren't as affected with working and earnings and SSI. So just important stuff. And then if any of you are looking at college for your kids, Eileen Berger is going to be doing a webinar on just getting ready for college and what that means for our kids, because our kids need some extra support to be able to be successful. So Hope you can join us.
That's great. Thank you. And just this week's a busy week because the day after the 688 piece, the Pathways to Friendship Project has Beth Mount, who's a wonderful keynote. There's going to be between 10 and 12:30, just all about community inclusion, friendship building, the focus from 10 to 12:30. It's like a mini conference. And that's on our Facebook and Twitter. And it's clearly something that if you're at all thinking about, it's a good take. And then Monday, we're having DDS Employment Services lead join us, a brand new leader in that area. So that Kerry coordinated with for me. So looking forward to that as well. Too much going on, I guess, but it'll keep you busy. And really, again, Leslie, you get us thinking about figuring out something for the adult piece here, and great work that you're doing. So everybody have a great week. It's June. Maybe we'll enjoy some good weather too. Take care.